and welcome to the next Tutor to You catch-up session for Edexcel GCSE 9-1 Business. In this catch-up session, we're going to continue to look at 1.4.1, which is a specification reference for the options for startup and small businesses, and we're going to be focusing today on sole traders. This topic area directly follows on from the last catch-up session where you examined limited and unlimited liability. So let's have a look at a definition for sole traders. A sole trader is a business that is set up and run by one person. That person therefore has full control over what goes on within the business. However, it's worth remembering that sole traders can employ staff to help them within the business. Sole traders are the most popular form of business ownership for startup businesses, and for this reason there are many examples of sole trader businesses that exist, and here are just a few examples of common sole trader businesses that you will be aware of. And we have hairdressers, window cleaners, florists, although there's many others including newsagents and plumbers. Now for the exam, you need to know the key features of a sole trader, but you also need to know about the advantages and disadvantages. And for any exam question that appears in the papers that you will see in the summer, you will only ever have to write a maximum of 2 points in your response. However, we have covered 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages here today. So I'm just going to quickly run through each of them. The first advantage is that the sole trader will have full control over decision making. That means the sole trader doesn't need to consult with other people when they're making decisions, and this means decision making is really fast, and because the sole trader is their own boss, they get to do exactly what they wish. Sole traders are very easy and quick to set up, and this ties in with what I said earlier in terms of it being a very popular type of business ownership for business startups, because these new businesses can start trading very quickly. The last advantage that we have here is that the sole trader can get to keep all the profits. And tying in with the first advantage, a sole trader obviously can make all the decisions, and instead of keeping all the profit, the sole trader may decide to reinvest some of that profit back into the business. But equally, they can keep all the profits for themselves, and this would be the reward for investing in this type of business ownership. The disadvantages include unlimited liability. Now, this is a big and the main disadvantage of being a sole trader, because it means that the owner is responsible for all the debts of the business, and therefore if the business failed and there was a huge amount of debts left that needed repaying, this would mean that the sole trader may have to sell personal possessions in order to pay off those particular debts. There is increased stress of running the business because the sole trader, as I said, has full control over decision making, but that means because of that, they need to be able to have the personality to be able to cope with lots of pressure and be able to coordinate and control lots of different aspects of the business at the same time. And this can be difficult for some people. It's also very difficult to raise startup capital, and this is because many new businesses fail, and banks therefore may be reluctant to lend new startups money, and if they do lend them money, they may attach a large interest fee to those particular loans. And for this reason, startup capital within sole trader businesses is often coming from personal sources of finance or from family and friends. So what we're going to do now is have a look at an exam question. And the exam question is, explain one drawback to an entrepreneur of setting up a business as a sole trader. Now this is an explain question which would appear in section A of your exam paper. Explain questions are a very important type of exam question because there are 6 of them in the paper and they are worth in total 20% of the marks. Therefore, it's absolutely vital that you understand how to answer explain questions accurately and efficiently. So what you need to do in any explain question is to first of all identify a point that answers specifically the question set. Now in this example, the question is asking for one particular drawback to an entrepreneur of setting up a business as a sole trader. However, other explain questions may ask for one benefit or one advantage. However, there are other explain questions which ask for one method or one way. So you must make sure that you read the question carefully before you start to respond. After you've made your point, you then need to include two link strands that explain the point that you have made. Now, these strands need to follow on from the point, as I've said, and therefore they must be logical and interconnected. And therefore, you need to use connectives such as this means that, therefore, as a result, in your answer to show that you are explaining your point. Rather than listing several drawbacks, you must make sure you just explain one drawback in your response. So, what I'd like you to do is pause the video and have a go at this question. Now, the timing in the exam is about a minute a mark. So if you time yourself and give yourself 3 minutes in order to answer this question, then please do so. If you'd rather just plan your response, then that's absolutely fine. But if you'd like to have a go at this now, pause the video and then restart the video when you've finished. Okay, so let's have a look at a response that we have on the screen. So you may have something similar, but the key is if you've come up with a different point, which is absolutely fine, you need to follow the exam technique that we're talking about here to ensure that you get the full marks for your actual response. So we have the entrepreneur will be responsible for all the debts of the business. So that is a clear drawback to an entrepreneur of setting up a business as a sole trader, and therefore 1 mark would be awarded. This is because, as a sole trader, he or she will have unlimited liability. So that is explanation of the point made. Now, you could have turned that around and started with one drawback is that the sole trader would have unlimited liability. This is because the entrepreneur would be responsible for all the debts of the business. It doesn't really matter as long as you are showing explanation. Now in my answer here, we then have the 3rd mark coming from this may put the entrepreneur's personal possessions at risk if the business failed. So you can clearly see that there are 3 separate sentences. The first point, which is responsibility for all the debts of the business, is explained in the next 2 sentences, and that would be awarded full marks in the exam. So just to finish off, we're going to have a look at some exam gold. Now, when students see questions about sole traders, they're generally quite happy because students tend to have really strong knowledge of sole traders. However, because of this, there is a danger that students tend to list more than one point in their response because they want to show the examiner they know lots and lots of information about sole traders. Now, in a question that we have seen here, explain one drawback, all the examiner is interested in is one drawback, and then explaining that drawback with connectives in 3 separate sentences. You must make sure that you don't list 2 or 3 points in your response because the examiner will be capped at giving you 1 mark for just one of those points. And unfortunately, even though you may have filled the space in the exam paper and you felt like you've shown lots of knowledge, you're not actually answering the question that is there. So writing more than 1 point just wastes time. Select your strongest point if you know lots of different knowledge points to the question, and then explain your point by using connectives in 3 separate sentences. And this concludes the PowerPoint and the catch-up session for sole traders.